Thursday, what did we end up doing? Being at work, hey, as always. Lunch, I think, was the highlight of it, which I had, I think it was beef tongue, or there's some form of tongue with rice and horseradish sauce. Once you got past what it was very, very nice, very soft and tender. Anyway, like I say, that was the highlight of the work day, but then following that, we went to the Royal Baths Park, which is the largest park in Warsaw, maybe Poland, I think. And we went there on Thursday because it's free to get in on Thursday, so best price. It's an 18th century palace garden, and it was, as you'll hear later, the residence of Poland's last king. So, as such, it involves or holds quite a few sort of older 18th century buildings. The first we went to was the White House, which is a wooden building built in 1774 for the king's sisters. Contains several very well decorated rooms with like art on the walls as well as paintings hung. Yeah, I had various statues, vases, and as I say, art. Following that, it was onto the old orangery, which was built along the same time as the other buildings to house sort of orange trees for, I guess, during the winter or something. Basically, it was a massive greenhouse. But it also contained the Museum of Royal Sculptures. And there's also the only 18th century court theatre in Poland. In this place is the Royal Theatre, with the box which we look at the theatre through was the King's box. So that's where he'd sit and watch all the performances go on by whoever. Finally, from the old orangery, it was onto the Palace on the Isle, which is as I say, palace on a man-made island in the middle of a lake. Began life as a Baroque bathhouse built for some count, and then became the summer residence of King Stanislaw II Augustus, who was the last king of Poland. And as you can imagine, there were loads of rooms, both upstairs and downstairs, very, very ornately decorated, like with loads of art on the walls. I think the king turned it into a art museum himself. Yeah, there were loads of sculptures, and there's also in the dining room, in what was the dining room, they sort of laid up a table so you could see exactly how it was back in the 18th century. And the ballroom had at each end fireplaces which had depicted various things. I think the one I'm showing at the moment had Cerberus holding up one side of the mantelpiece. By then, everything started closing up, so we ended up walking back through the park back to Sabinki, where on the way we stopped to get some food at this very nice little restaurant at Pole Mokotowski. That's what I can pronounce. Quite reasonably priced as well. And as you can see, I had pizza and a beer. And that pretty much concluded Thursday. Friday was a very long day. I was in work 9 till 6 in the end. Managed to get my code to work. As Bryn sat down, we both went through my code. He then went through stuff which he thought I knew already, which, as I didn't, was holding me back from progressing. And then, as I say, yeah, left work at 6, so didn't really fancy doing much after that. As it was Hector's last day, we ended up going for Chinese, me, Hector and Hannah. Today I decided to visit a few museums and cemeteries. So the plan was to go to the Jewish cemetery, which is meant to be one of the largest in the world, the museums of Warsaw Uprising and Pawiak prison, which was a prison used by the Gestapo and stuff. I'll tell you about that in a bit. That didn't really go to plan because, as I'll explain later, the cemetery was closed, and as was Pawiak by the time I got there. So the day started off, I went to this massive great big shopping mall called Arcadia. I think it's like the largest in Warsaw. It's like 190 shops, 3 floors, loads to do, including a massive great big Carrefour where they sold things like 4.5 litres bottles of Jameson's and about 3 litre bottles of JD, only about 500, 600 zloty, so not too bad. Didn't end up getting it, but what I did end up getting was some ponchek. So yeah, spent about an hour walking around, didn't really buy much. As I say, it was mainly just that food stuff, got a bit of cheese and stuff. Yeah, it was then a short little walk to Pulaski Cemetery itself. Past Catholic Church, which used to be the parish church, and Cemetery Church, but is now, as I say, a proper Catholic church. Yeah, this Pulaski Cemetery is the most famous in the city. It's one of the oldest. It's a treasure of sculpture and mini architecture. There's over 1 million tombs there. Estimates show there's over 1 million tombs. But unfortunately, the records were destroyed during the war because they were stored in the church, which was burned down when, I think during the Warsaw Uprising, the Germans set up their heavy artillery there. So falling shells caused the fire, which destroyed the roof of the church and some of the documents as well. So, as I say, estimates show over 1 million tombs. But they were all really, really densely packed in. And like there were trees and plants growing between them. Really, really beautiful. I know it's a strange thing to say, but it's an experience to be around that many tombs. As I say, the plan was then to go to Paliak, so I went via the Jewish cemetery, which, as I say, was closed on Saturdays, and also I realised that has very strict rules, which I understand all that, but A, I'm not Jewish, B, I don't really have anything to cover my head. It would be a lot less disrespectful for me just to not go there to sort of look at the videos on YouTube instead. So these photos you're seeing now, I took them just off Google Images. Yeah, this Jewish cemetery is one of the largest in the world, and it contains mass graves of victims of the Warsaw Ghetto. Due to that, many of the tombs were abandoned following the German invasion and then also the Holocaust. And as such, the cemetery's become a dense forest filled with abandoned tombs, headstones, mausoleums, and I read that there are piles of headstones because the Germans were ripping them up to use the stones to build buildings, roads. The inscriptions were removed, or in some cases, headstones were just laid in the ground face down. Like I said, I got to Paliak. It was about an hour's walk from the cemeteries, and it closed like 20 minutes after I got there, so there's no point going in. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that now. It was initially acted as a transfer camp for Poles who were sentenced to Siberia. Then in 1939, the Nazis set up a Gestapo prison there, and then it became part of the concentration camp system, unfortunately. It was destroyed on August 21st, 1944, leaving behind half the gateway and 3 detention cells. Ended up going for about an hour's walk back to Centrum via the Palace of Science and Culture. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but today I thought I'd attempt to go up to the 30th floor where they've got an observation tower. You can see Warsaw from up there. But unfortunately, as I arrived, so did a big group, so I figured that it would make more sense to leave it till tomorrow to try it out. As I say, following the Palace of Science and Culture, which is actually that tall building, ended up exploring around Centrum Station, which is like, there's a massive great big TK Maxx and M&S and all sorts of shops, loads of restaurants. So if you fancy like burgers or KFC or pizza or Mexican food, whatever, I think there's falafel place as well. Centrum is well worth a visit. From there, back on a train, back to Sabinki, where I've just been doing a bit of research since then, recording, editing. But I'm knackered after walking about 10k, and when you're in sort of 29-30 degree heat as well, you definitely know. So I've got a feeling I'm a bit burnt on my shoulders and feeling something on my face. Plan is tomorrow to go up to the 30th floor of the Palace of Science and Culture and Paliak Prison, maybe see what else I can find. Might just find a park, then it'll be very hot again. See you tomorrow. Sunday! Hey, 2 weeks down, 3 to go. Ended up going to the Paliak Prison Museum, and straight away there's a massive, great big sort of display of cabinets and poems and stories of people. In these cabinets were various items covered, so that included Star of David armbands, which they had to wear, crosses and stuff like that made from bread. And then you turn around and there was a hallway which was lined with cells, mock cells, which the majority of were just designed for 2 to 3 people tops. There's also a cell called the death cell, which is where prisoners were kept when they were awaiting execution. and there was an original door from sort of Paviak when it was being used. So that was the Paviak Prison Museum. Quite interesting, glad I went. Then from there I decided to grab some lunch and up in this little cafe where I had a Lithuanian cold beet soup, buttermilk with beetroot and a hard-boiled egg cut into four, plonked in the middle. Following that it was a savoury pancake which had chicken, bacon, cheese and apricot of all things in it. But surprisingly both of them were quite tasty. Look familiar? Back in Old Warsaw Marketplace. Decided to come by here after getting lunch on the way to Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. But yeah, definitely quieter today. It's probably because it's a Sunday, not Saturday. But ended up going up the bell tower of St Anne's Church. I missed it every time I've been to Old Town so far. And you get a beautiful view of the Warsaw skyline and parts of Old Town. Where you've got the Church Square, Palace Square. Worth the walk up, if we put it that way. Then it was onto the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, as I said, which is set in the remains of a Saxon palace, I think it was. And this tomb, accompanying it, is an eternal flame, and it's always got two armed guards either side of the tomb itself. Behind the tomb, there was a giant park which had statues and really nice fountain in the middle. So I passed through that, and that took me out near Palace of Science and Technology, which, as I said earlier, my plan was to go up there, but I decided not to do it today, because I went up the one in Old Town. So yeah, I ended up, hopped on a metro all the way back to Pole Mokotowski, where there's a park. I decided to buy an ice cream, which is very tasty. And then just sat on the edge of the lake with my feet in the water, reading a scientific paper, watching the world go by. And that's pretty much where I finished my day. I was there till about 5, half 5-ish, came back, had some dinner, and now recording and editing more. That was my weekend. Apologies, this is a slightly longer video than the rest, and there's not really been much going on, but I hope you enjoyed my little updates. I'll see you next time on Thursday. I'm going to do Sunday upload, Thursday upload. That'd be a good little split.